Oh, great. We are live again for the third of three broadcasts this Christmas Day, live streaming with connections with Tavia and the McClish. And we were excited to have an extended podcast or broadcast day today on Christmas because there's a lot of people that are feeling alone and sick and maybe in the hospital, maybe in a rehab facility, maybe at home. Or, you know what? There's a lot of people that feel alone with a lot of family around. Let's be real about it, right? I mean, feeling alone doesn't mean that you're physically alone. It can be a lot of other things. So, and Tavia is took a little break today. She is with her family at home enjoying Christmas, and we wish her and her family the best this Christmas, of course. And we have had amazing discussions with an awful lot of people so far today. In the first broadcast, we spoke with Lori Bickle, who really is just a huge inspiration to an awful lot of people. She talked a little bit about her hero's journey. And I mean, we could have spent hours talking about that, but she just did an amazing job sort of recapping that. And she is now working to help other people as they sort of transition at different times in their life with different types of situations. And she is moving out of state and from Missouri to Florida in the very near future, and I think has some big plans to be of much greater service to a lot more people. So that was a really inspirational story, and certainly, uh, I think, sort of embraces this whole concept of connection and the need for it. And so we appreciate her taking the time to talk about that, talk about affirmations, how important those affirmations were to her 5 years ago when she really was at the beginning of this journey. And she still to this day is using affirmations and really strongly believes in those. And I think many people would agree that those are absolutely crucial to gaining the success that so many people want in terms of not repeating day after day and not just doing the same old paradigm programming that they've been doing for so many years. And at some point, they realize I've been, I feel like I've been a hamster on a wheel that just runs and runs and runs, but don't really get anywhere at the end of all that running. And that can be challenging. So, again, Lori did a phenomenal job addressing that. And if you missed it, her website is loriannbickle.com. And I would encourage you to visit that and check in with her if you're at that place and just maybe want a kind ear to bend and get some really good advice. So, and we dedicated the first broadcast to Lori actually because it was her wisdom that essentially led us to recognize that the day that most people found to be the most significant in terms of loneliness was a Sunday. And in fact, statistically, scientifically, that certainly turned out to be accurate. And that is really great information. And we appreciate her sharing that with us. And that is what changed a shift. And we originally had talked about doing this podcast on a Friday evening, and then we decided to shift it to Sunday based on, in large part, on her initial comments about that. So we really want to thank her for that. And then the second broadcast today, we dedicated to a lady named Ashley Capogreco and her brother, Michael Ward. Michael has been has been battling for a number of years, pretty rare type of illness. And that guy is a warrior and a half, actually, probably more like 2 to 10 warriors in one person. And he is amazing and certainly inspirational. His story is inspirational. His strength is inspirational, and his fortitude is amazing. So we dedicated it to Ashley Capogreco and her brother, Michael Ward. And we had a chance to talk with Virginia Chang, who's an end-of-life doula from New York. and she had a really amazing perspective and ideas on not when you say the word or term end of life doula, I think we just automatically think about someone who is focusing on death. And of course, if we're born, then we know that, like taxes, death is inevitable, right? There's no question there. We all have an expiration date. We don't know when that is. And by the way, there's no one out there, unless you're God, that can tell us or tell you what that date is. I don't care how many medical degrees or any other degrees they have. I mean, the fact is, and I'm sure you're familiar with stories or people you might know that were told, hey, you've got a month, a year, 2 years to live. And these people are still going really strong years later. And those stories abound. And so, none of us know our actual expiration date. But nevertheless, as Virginia Chang so eloquently discussed, the concept of mortality awareness and thinking about that idea at least once a day. And the idea is that by recognizing or by like affirmations, right? By thinking about that mortality in a different way, in a useful, positive way, we can actually live a much more abundant and substantive, meaningful life in the present moment now, so that at the end, whenever that is for each of us, we don't have those regrets that we've talked about a number of times from Bronnie Ware, who has documented her experience for years working with people at the end of their days, and noting that the top two issues that people have are wishing that they had pursued their dreams and aspirations rather than the life that others had expected of them, right? And uh, how crucial is that? And the second thing being that they work too hard. And I mean, I'm sure that if you're not a really hard worker or bordering on a workaholic, you know people that are. And that in and of itself could be as much of an addiction and as much of a debilitating addiction as any other addiction, like drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping, binge watching TV, you name it, whatever it is. These things are all used to numb things that we're trying to run from. And they're really deleterious to our way of life in terms of being in the present moment and actually making a life that we want. And by having a life that we want and feel comfortable with, we're going to be better people to the people that we love and that surround us. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, there's really no way to dispute that. So Virginia Chang, her concept of mortality awareness was amazing. Then we had a chance to talk with Father Bob Flannery, who is pastor at the St. Francis Xavier Church in Carbondale, or again, as the more affluent might say, Carbondale, Illinois. And he is amazing in his own right. He's been a priest for many, many years, and his perspective in terms of speaking with people who are sick is that, hey, we don't need to do anything or say anything particularly unique or fancy. Being there is just what is the call for the day, right? It's being there and being present. And to steal a verse from Virginia Chang, be an empty vessel for the person that you're sitting with, right? It's not about you, but it's about them. And Father Bob, I thought, did a phenomenal job sort of putting that all together. And I loved his take on connection in regards to people that might be grieving a loss of a loved one or someone close to them, or even someone who does have a chronic or terminal illness and might have an opportunity locally or online to participate in a support group. I mean, there's support groups out there for all different kinds of things. And I got to tell you, uh, I know a lot of people think, hey, I have to just deal with this alone. I can do this. I don't have a choice. Nobody cares. But the act of taking the step to joining a support group or something like that is absolutely life changing for the people that are sick or are grieving, makes a huge difference. So, Father Bob had the idea in regards to that. If you know someone who is in that position, but they are reluctant or recalcitrant to make that step, because taking that one small step, which might seem small to you, it might seem small to a lot of people, but to someone who is ill, to someone who is grieving, that's what seems like that small step to you. It might be analogous to parasailing over the Grand Canyon, right? A huge thing that they just don't have the wherewithal to take the leap with. So, Father Bob's approach was, hey, go with them, set it up for them, of course, with their approval, but just say, hey, listen, I'll tell you what, I know of this support group. I hear really good things about it. And if it's something local where you can take someone to go, that's obviously ideal to, to physically go to a place, and go with them. I mean, what better way to make a meaningful and true, genuine connection with someone, right? You don't have to talk about anything, but just to physically go there, help them set it up, and be there with them so they don't feel scared or alone, which ultimately will simply mean that they won't do it. So, by being with them, what a great way to facilitate that action step that otherwise most likely never would happen. I mean, come on, we know how hard it is when, everybody's been sick, and when you're sick, even if it's, I'm in here where I'm at, people are sick all over the place. They have sinus infections. I mean, the flu is really, everybody knows it's spiked right now. And when you're feeling bad, you just don't have the wherewithal to do even some of the most simple things that if you weren't sick, you'd be like, well, what's the problem? Well, it's a problem because you're sick and not feeling well. And so anything we can do to help people like that, wow, big benefit. And I appreciate Father Bob commenting on that. And honestly, that was something I don't know why. It just seems like a really, like, it doesn't seem like it's a complicated thing, but I had never thought about it. And I think we all benefited significantly from his discussion. So this, our third and final broadcast today on Christmas Day that we're live streaming. Tavia and I want to dedicate this to all veterans, people that have sacrificed their time, in many cases their lives, but put themselves at risk so that we could be free to pursue the things that we wanted and the lifestyle that we want. And the fact that we're here speaking English in 2022 on Christmas Day is very significant. So we wanted to dedicate this to all veterans. And we also want to dedicate it to the parents and children that are in the foster system. The foster system is it's interesting because I one of my vices is watching television in the evening, and I see so many commercials for animal groups, including, elephants and animals in Africa, and dogs and cats. And I have no issue with all these animals. I'm actually a big advocate for all animals. However, I find it interesting. This year I had an opportunity to get to know some people in the foster system and to really understand that this is a system that is so incredibly important, because you're talking about children, right? That some cases are newborn, 1 year old, 2 year old, very young, up to teenagers that are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. And they have come from circumstances and backgrounds where you just have to wonder, how are they ever really going to have a chance, right? I mean, it's a very difficult situation. And so now you're putting children with foster parents who have varying degrees of experience and training in this whole dynamic, and that is a difficult place. And I think how many years that I've lived, and I really have not heard a lot about the foster system. Certainly not. I don't want to say it's negative, but not a lot of positive, really not a lot of any sort, not negative, not positive, just not a lot about that system. I certainly never see commercials on television talking about these things, really talking about children in the system. I think that my understanding is a lot of the system, because there's not enough money, there's not enough resources of any kind, including personnel, that the systems within the foster organizations nationwide are somewhat antiquated, behind the times. And I honestly can't think of any group that is more warrants help, caring, and benevolence than both parents and children in the foster system. And this year, Tavia and I are going to delve a lot more into this and get some people talking about the system, about what the needs are of the system, and how we can make things better. Because the thing is, children coming out of the foster system, if they've had really great experiences, are going to become healthier adults that operate in a healthy, meaningful way and become excellent citizens. And then you have others that, if they had horrible situations and very difficult backgrounds, that maybe they'll come out in a different way. So, it's really important that we have at least an awareness of the system itself, and what's right with the system, what's wrong with the system, and what can be improved, and how we can sort of make that happen. And I know Tavia and I are looking forward to that this coming year. So that's the two groups that we are dedicating this third of three broadcasts to today, and that is all veterans and parents and children in the foster system. So without further ado, I want to get to this next interview that I feel it was just a great opportunity to have, and I'm very thankful for her time. But Kit Maxwell, who has been a lifelong therapist in the St. Louis area. And at a certain point, she started working with horses in a bit of a unique way. And I think I mentioned in the first broadcast that you've probably heard of equine therapy. And those of us that have heard that, and maybe have an awareness of that, that's sort of I'm not going to say antiquated, but it's just what I think we think of are kids and certain types of adults that ride horses as part of a therapeutic program, that groom horses, that clean out their shoes, and just do a lot of sort of physical connection things with horses. But what we're going to talk about with Kit Maxwell today, who is the owner of zenhorse.org, is an entirely different concept of horses connecting with people. And if you have not had this experience, and I doubt any of you have, because this is like the world's best kept secret, it is a truly amazing and awesome experience. And everyone that I know that has gone through this, they all say the same word. They say, "Oh my gosh, this is really profound, just a profound experience," which is helpful, right? But then I always ask sort of the follow-up question, well, what does that mean? I mean, your profound might be different from someone else's profound. So tell me what that meant to you. Like, why do you find that so profound? And invariably, people say, I can't tell you. I just don't know how to describe it. It was just so impactful. So Kit and I talk a little bit about that, and a lot about connection between humans and horses and humans, and even horses and horses. So I think you'll find this really interesting, and she is amazing. And let me see if I can get this on here without messing it up, because I've been known to do that a time or two. But I think we're good. Yeah,
All
here we are.
right.
Kit Maxwell, we had to start over on our recording because you turned into some very grainy images and we could not hear you. So, but you are Kit Maxwell and you own zenhorse.org, right? Which is a phenomenal organization. And you started to talk a little bit about that in our first recording, but we lost it. So let me start back again, talking about the fact that you've been a therapist through your life and helping people with their issues and to create and enhance connections that they have in their life. And then later on, seemed like you got more into working with horses with clients as well. And I'm just curious what that meant for you in terms of connections and how you see it now in terms of enhancing that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, the bird's eye view is I grew up with horses. So I was, had that lifetime experience of really being with horses from the moment I was born. And then I was actually learning, it wasn't until much later, till my 40s, that I learned about how horses were partnering in like life coaching settings and therapeutic settings, not the riding kind of therapy, but in psychotherapy and emotional support. Mind blown. I flew out to California and participated in it. And then I thought, yes, oh my gosh, this is for me. I have to do this. The connections with the horses, the way that they show up differently with people, you can go farther, faster working with a horse emotionally and therapeutically in 20 minutes than you can in sometime months of talk therapy,
right? Just
because of the amazing connections and things that come out for people. So once I learned that, I was all in.
And yet it's like the world's best kept secret, because I have yet to run into anyone anywhere, no matter what they do. I mean, people that most people would consider to be, like aware of a lot of things like that. Nobody's ever heard of it. Like everybody talks about equine therapy, which I believe is something much different from what you and I know to be like what you do with circle meditations and things, because equine therapy is typically associated with working with the horses, if I'm correct in this, like riding, taking care of. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
Right. What most people know of equine therapy, like you said, is more hippotherapy, where like people with disabilities and even veterans are riding the horses, because there are a lot of really great physiological, emotional benefits that come from riding a horse. We could talk a whole lot about that. Most of the people who are doing work similar to what I do, they call it EAL, which is equine assisted learning, mm-hmm. because typically they're not doing what they want to call therapy. They're doing more like life coaching types of things with horses. So right. You might see it as EAL, like equine assisted learning. So equine assisted therapists like myself, we try to call it like equine assisted psychotherapy, things like that. So it is kind of hard to find like, okay, who's doing exactly what with their therapeutic horse experiences.
Right, because there's a wide spectrum of work. Because I think years and years ago, I mean, when I would hear about equine therapy, I know there's work that, especially with children with like autism, different disabilities, that mm-hmm. they use that, right? But again, it's more with connecting physically and through the work with the horse, as opposed to this, which is a more sort of spiritual connection with the animal.
Yes, exactly. And I think that the hippotherapy I think it has that spiritual connection in a sense, but yeah, it's not the focus, it's a large part of the focus of what we do.
So can you talk about the horses that you have and what their story is? Because they have a story, and where they come from and how you sort of got into the adoption process with some of these Mustangs and different horses that you have.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. As part of the second level of training for the Equus coaching certificate that I have, which is in the master facilitator level, we had to go work for 4 days with 2 completely unhandled wild Mustangs. And at that point, I had no really knowledge. I mean, I knew what a Mustang was, but I didn't know anything about them or their plight, the situation, And so it was heartbreaking to learn what was really happening with the American wild Mustang. So again, we could talk a whole lot about what that was. But I was exposed to the 2 Mustangs, and at the end of the 4 days that we worked with the horses, they were going to send one of them back to the Bureau of Land Management. And I thought, oh my gosh, we can't do that. So I went ahead and adopted that horse and brought her home. And so she became the first Mustang that we have. And after you know something, you can't unknow it.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, it's not enough. Saving 1 starfish is great, but we had the capacity to save a few more starfish. So we made that part of our mission to do what we could to support rescuing, rehabilitating, and sometimes placing when we can adopt out the Mustangs, but otherwise we just keep them because we love them. So we have 9 horses with us right now. Our 2 newest ones are completely unhandled Mustangs that we were able to acquire through an online auction from the Bureau of Land Management. So we're working on their training, a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old. And then all but one horse is an American domestic quarter horse, but all of the others are Mustangs that were born in the wild and ended up in bad circumstances of one type or another.
What is their story? I mean, and you said it's heartbreaking, but why is it hard? Like, what is their plight?
Well, in the West, where most of the Mustangs live, it's one of those really politically deep things.
Everything is right.
Right. But I think the highest level description is the wild horses live on government land, and there are many people with lots of money who have cattle, and those people want the land for the cattle. And so there are some situations where the land won't support the horses, that it really is becoming desert, but most of the time that's a little bit debatable. But so either way, the government is rounding them all up. And so there are, at last count, I think we're over 60,000 horses in holding that they mow them down with helicopters. That is horrific. A lot of them die in the gathering.
Wow.
As they try to save their families. Because they're very family-oriented animals, and then they are separated from their families, and then they're in these holding lots, and they just stand there until some die in holding, some are adopted, and then sadly, there are people who are making money off of that process, because you could buy a Mustang for $125. And then as long as you keep it for a year and they check on you and it's still alive, then you can sell it to a kill pen for more money. And so, so that's why we're adopting as many as we can straight out of the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, that are untrained. We know we need to train them, but we're also working with a rescue that's pulling them out of those kill pen situations as fast as they can and as early as they can. So we're trying to help at both ends of the problem.
So they would be in a kill pen for what purpose? For food, or become?
They go to, I believe it was to both Canada and Mexico. I can't remember. I think it's just Mexico now that is still using horses to create
for dog food.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's horrific, for certain. Yeah. Okay. Wow. My goodness. So, I guess there's just not a lot of information about that either, because I mean, like circle meditations, I never heard that actual, scenario. I didn't realize. I knew there was something bad. I just didn't know what it was. I'm just wondering why there isn't more publicity about that happening and the fact that it is happening, because I'm sure a lot of people, if they could, would try to help. Great question.
I think it's like once you get into that pocket of knowledge, you find, there's a whole bunch, but until you find your entry point into that vein of knowledge, I had no idea until that first experience. So that's a great question. And I try, like in our newsletter, to put like links to neutral sources. I try not to get everybody fired up with personal opinions, but like maybe to National Geographic talking about it, or something like that. But at the meditation circles, I don't talk about that so much. It's more of, setting the tone for a really lovely meditation. It's like,
absolutely,
what what I end up talking about. So yeah, to your point, maybe we need to, and by we, I mean, myself, think about, gosh, being more intentional about making that information accessible to people.
So I'm just curious, you get a horse from that type of situation, which seems extremely traumatic. I mean, animal or human, that's traumatic, right? So, and I remember a long time ago, you talked about that horse. I'm trying to remember how you said it. I think you said that horses don't necessarily have drama, but they have stories. Or maybe it was the other way around. But I remember you saying, yeah.
It was the other way around.
Okay.
Right. They don't have stories, which is super helpful.
But they have drama. Right.
They do have drama. Yeah.
Okay, that's right.
Interestingly, animals in the wild do not get traumatized. Animals in the wild don't experience trauma because they can go through the natural, either they get eaten or they go through the natural cycle of processing the trauma because the body has a process for that. So it's only humans and animals in captivity that do experience trauma. And so, yes, our focus here at Zen Horse, our mission is to support the healing of humans and horses that have experienced trauma. That's our whole point.
And there is a connection that happens in a circle meditation, which I know you're going to describe in a minute, but it's the kind of thing that is so, because I've known so many people that have been at one, and I say, so what is, how would you describe it in words if you had to describe it? And everybody says, it's profound. Okay, but so can you describe it? Oh, it's just profound. I mean, what does that mean to you? Because profound means a lot of things to a lot of people, right? I mean, profound could be an awesome ribeye steak or, something else, right? A big piece of chocolate cake. I mean, what does it mean that it's profound? And it's just funny because like everyone says the same thing when they come away from it. And yet I have not really heard very many people put into words what happens in this connectivity that clearly happens, even when the horse or horses do not actually physically connect with a person. I like when I've been at some of the meditations that I've been at, some people, the horses don't, go up to and spend time with, and yet they have been profoundly impacted, which is interesting to me because I would have thought they might not have been, or they would have thought, well, how come the horse did? But they've seen messages coming from things that the horse has done with other people, or they've taken things away from it, which I find amazing and inspirational. So what do you see as far as the connectivity that happens between horse and human at a circle meditation?
Well, first of all, I think you're 100% spot on that it is so difficult to describe, to put into words. Every time I think I'm close and, and so they're like, I had a great experience. Great. What will you say to everyone? I'll tell them you have to experience it yourself.
Right.
No.
And then they're like, this sounds like a scam. What do you mean I have to experience? Just tell me what I'm going to know, what's going to happen.
Just come. I had just quickly one client where sometimes when I'm seeing a client that is just a regular office client, we'll come up with something and I'll say, hey, I have a hunch as to what is going on here, but if you'll come out and work with the horses, I'll be able to tell you for sure. And so this one client came out, and again, she had a lot of trauma, and everyone's got, even if we have little T traumas in life, but she's had some big T traumas in life. And so she came out and had her session with the horses. And at the end, it was one of the best things ever. She had an amazing experience. And she said to me, as she's sobbing, having this huge happy release, sobbing through happy smile, she said, when you told me that if I came out here and worked with horses, that it would be a game changer. And she said, I kind of I didn't believe you. I was like, that's great. Thank you so much. So now, yeah. And to your point, I will say too, in the beginning, when I first started serving people, there's a part of me that wants to make sure that everybody has a good experience. And so I thought, oh my gosh, if the horse doesn't come up and connect with each person, how's that person going to feel? What are they going to think? And now, so many years in, you're right, that everyone comes away and says, yeah, that was perfect, actually. So I'll find out when we debrief, no one ever has to share, but when they do share, it'll be things like, well, I was really uncomfortable kind of with the horse being so close to me because they were so big. So I really didn't want them to be close to me. I was happy where they were. And so where they were, we were connecting from that distance, and that felt better for me. So everybody really had a reason as to why not connecting that closely felt right for them and why they came away with something.
Right.
But for connection itself, one of the amazing things is that as humans, we have an electromagnetic bubble, right? And ours is about roughly 10 feet in diameter. And the horse's electromagnetic bubble is about 50 feet in diameter. Mm-hmm. So they really can, even from those greater distances, be completely connected with us. And what it feels like for people, depending on the horses and the sensitivity and the style of the receiver. For example, we have learning styles. We're all a little bit different in how we receive information. Some people just feel that resonation from the horses in that field of like, oh, I just felt good. I just felt loved. I just felt seen. And there is some science behind that. I also included a link in one of my newsletters to the Heart Math Institute study that talks about what really physiologically is happening. Exactly. So they'll talk about, oh, I just felt loved, seen, good. Other people who are having deeper connections might have said, well, I received actually some insight. I received like an answer to a question that was really big for me. I saw some information, or I heard some information, in my mind, in my internal self, that was life-changing. So it ranges from what people take away. But you're right, everybody gets something.
Well, and I can give you one example of that myself. At one of the early meditations that we were at with a person that I was there with, who would not be someone that I would, he's somebody that doesn't move quickly on things, and like just like a lot of people, right? They talk about a lot of things, but then action isn't necessarily so quick to happen. So, but after the meditation, and this was with a horse that passed away recently, Winchester, and another horse that you actually adopted out to Camp Ondasant down in Southern Illinois. So, but he, after the meditation, out of nowhere, had the epiphany that he needed to start a business, a foundation, which he did. Now, the funny thing about that is I thought to myself, wow, I mean, it's a great idea. I mean, he had the title of it, even from the circle meditation. He came up with the title, all this. I thought, now this is a guy, I mean, he's not going to get the tax exemption. I mean, he'll start it, but it'll be forever before he gets the IRS letter saying, you've been awarded the tax exemption. And within like 4 months, he had his tax exemption letter from the IRS. And I told you about this, I was blown away. I was like, this is a guy that you would have a hard time getting to go to Walmart to get toilet paper, or, just something he needed. And here's something so like ephemeral and awesome, right? And deep and meaningful, but to actually see the follow through that came from that, I just don't think there's a human being on the earth that could have gotten him to move at the pace he did, and with the tenacity and persistence that he moved with after that one connection with Poppy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's the kind of thing that I've seen with, I've been to a number of these with a lot of different people that I really like him, that I would not expect to see have significant come-aways with, and I see it every single time. Even the people where the horse isn't, face to face with them or necessarily connecting with them with that one-on-one feeling, but I every single time it's just mind-blowing to me how that works. And I obviously you see it day in and day out, week in, month in, and year in, but that's gotta feel really pretty cool.
It's amazing. And yeah, in the beginning, like I said, you read about these things and you're like, oh, it's amazing, blah, blah, blah. But when you're trying to deliver that to somebody and hoping that they have a great experience, the first few, I was like, oh my gosh, is this going to be worthwhile? Is everybody going to be okay? And then, yes, at this part in, I'm like, whew, okay, everything will unfold as it needs to. And now it's great to be in that space of like, okay, like yourself, having seen it enough times, like, oh, there's complete confidence. But sure, in the beginning, I was like, okay, I make no promises. We're going to go in there. We're going to sit down. The horses will mill about. Who knows what will happen? So yeah, it's great to be this far in and have seen so many things and just really know in your heart that it's all going to be amazing.
Well, and just if you could maybe explain the process, because I know when people hear something like a circle meditation, I was listening to a sports psychologist expert who works with professional basketball players and football players, and he was on an interview saying, listen, I can't talk to these guys about meditation, because if I say the word meditation, they're automatically going to tell me to go pound sand. So I have to come up with another word for the same thing, but then they'll do it because it sounds more masculine to them. So for whatever reason, they think, well, I'm not doing a meditation because I'm not a girl or whatever, right? And he's like, that's the mindset. So I have to think of something. But so, with the circle meditation, there's nothing from a religious background. There's nothing woo-woo. There's nobody wearing tie-dye shirts and Birkenstock sandals. I mean, can you just kind of explain sort of the how this looks when if a family came in or a group came in with 5-10 people, like how would the process look?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. And a great question. I too, I'll just say real quickly about that word meditation. I learned that meditation has a lot of different applications, and that the word meditation in the sense that we use it is really for any meditation. A meditation can be you go into the grocery store, and it just really means like when I'm just being in the moment that I'm in with some kind of intention of being there.
A flow state, being in the present moment, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's no like, yeah, you're right. We don't like, I mean, you cannot do a meditation circle wrong. So if you are like, oh, I've devoted your life to years of meditation, great, all are welcome. But if you're a person that's like, I don't really, no expectation on what that looks like. It's just come, sit down, be present, and that's the meditation. So yeah, people, what we do is we come in and we have our chairs, we sit in chairs, comfortable chairs in a circle. And in the beginning, I had the circle closed so that the horses could walk, and then they're in a container. So we're like in an arena, and the horses could walk only on the outside of the circle because in the early days, again, my main concern being people getting their little toes stepped on.
Right.
Like, this will be safer. But when COVID happened, it forced me to expand literally and figuratively. And that became a wonderful thing. So now we just keep doing it. So we had to obviously move out to at least 6 feet between each other, which allowed the horses to come into the circle. And that has opened up a whole new set of things. But so we're just sitting in the circle, and we talk about like how to watch your toes and where the horse can see so they don't accidentally step on you. So we cover like basic horse safety. But other than that, we just sit for 20 minutes and I play some quiet music for 20 minutes, and a person can sit there with their eyes open, with their eyes closed. They don't have to enter any kind of intentional meditative state. Although again, some people do because they like enjoy it. But for me, I think if I were attending a meditation circle, I probably would just sit and watch because that's what I do anyway. Luckily,
it's really interesting, right? Yeah,
right, exactly. Facilitator, I watch. So regardless of whether a person wants to sit with their eyes closed or open, again, being just kind of aware or being in their own internal meditative state, I'm watching. So I have a circle on my clipboard and I have everybody's names, and I'm taking notes and watching and taking pictures for people who want pictures, but we never publicize those if people don't want it. But sometimes people want a really sweet picture of them and their horse. But I'm taking notes, and then we debrief afterward of like, what did you see? What did you notice? What questions did you have? And again, no one ever has to share. So we have some people who don't feel comfortable sharing, which is 100% fine. So, but we do brief for people who want to share, ask questions, and we just talk through that.
And now you recently moved to a much larger facility, sort of outside, kind of west of St. Louis. I guess it's not Augusta. It's what is it called? The town.
We're in the sliver of St. Charles County, but also Marthasville.
Marthasville, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, right between Augusta and Wentzville and Washington. We're kind of just right in the middle of those three.
And so I think now that you've moved there, are you offering, like, if you know, like at holidays, you know, people have family in and they have, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 people. I mean, is that something that you can accommodate, smaller numbers like that? Or
yeah, absolutely. For meditation circles.
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely. We have, again, you're right. It's our first year here, and the weather is gross right now. So we didn't do a meditation circle in November or December. I don't know what January will look like, but typically we have one open meditation every month. But we do also do private ones, and for families or friends. The last one we did was in, I guess it was early November. We did a private one for a gal and 3 of her friends. So it was just an intimate 4-person meditation circle, and it was perfect. So the most we do is typically 12, 13, maybe 14 people, just again, so that the horses can have a chance to interact with people individually. The bigger it gets, the harder it gets for people to feel like they really do get.
well, yeah, right, sure.
One-on-one.
Yeah.
Definitely. People can reach out if they would like to do a private one and come with family or friends. It was really sweet for that group, because it's when the whole group has a different relationship with each other, you'll see the horses, they behave, as you said a couple times, they behave differently every single time based on who's at the
Bar none, right?
circle, bar none. But it's often quite sweet when it's a family or a group of friends, and you'll just notice this extra loving layer of support that the horses illustrate, kind of reflecting what's happening in the relationship in the group, and where conflict, if that's there.
Well, right. And there's usually some level of angst, it's part of the interesting part about the horses, in that it's always struck me that they have an ability to really pierce through our BS, right? The BS that we put on as facades, like, you know, whatever we put onto the world or airs that, you know, we're this, we're that. Well, the horses don't care about what we pretend to be, right? They just know what you are, and they kind of cut through all those layers. It's just interesting to see how they do that so quickly and effortlessly.
It is. And that actually freaks some people out, because they really have a little fear of being seen. You're like, oh my gosh, you know, if this horse really sees me, is that going to be okay? You know, it was, of course, going to reflect back. But so I'll just say, you know, the horses they don't judge, they don't have story. So they're just reflecting back what they see. Like, oh, you know, even if you feel anxious or afraid, they don't care about that, as long as, like you said, as long as you're owning that, oh, I feel anxious or afraid. It's when we oh, I'm fine, you know, that they reflect back, oh, I think you're trying to feel something you don't feel. You're trying to stuff down your real feels, and they just reflect that back. They don't judge that.
Well, I talked to someone this morning and I was talking about circle meditations, and she immediately said, which is just funny, because this is, you either get people that have great experiences early on with horses, or for whatever reason they don't, right? So they were a kid, they got kicked or they got thrown off a horse. And the first thing she said was, oh, I had a bad experience when I was growing up with a horse. And I said, yeah, I think, and it strikes me that there's usually at least 20 to 30%, at least in most of the meditations I've been at, where somebody's had some experience and it wasn't necessarily a good one, or there's some trepidation. And so do you see normally that after the process that's kind of really helped to assuage those issues?
Without fail. And I especially appreciate, you know, when people come in, they don't seem to hesitate to tell me, but it's always nice when we just get that out of the way, you know, and acknowledge, hey, that is totally 100% fine here to be freaked out, have a bad experience, be a little cautious about this, be flat out scared. Just, say that. And then right afterward, they'll say, that was amazing. I felt so unafraid.
Exactly, right. Because they actually made a connection.
Yeah.
And just like, it reminds me of social media, like you and I can hate each other on social media because you're anonymous and I'm anonymous. So we can tear each other to pieces. But if you and I are having a conversation face to face, it's kind of tough to do that. So like horses, when you're, face to face with a 1,000-pound horse, and what you feel, because what is happening is there's benevolence and grace, and you can't unsee that and unfeel that. Right. So no matter how scared you might have been based on a prior experience, now you're talking to, or not talking to, this isn't Mr. Ed, but you're with an animal that actually is giving you benevolence and grace, and is not afraid of you and isn't afraid of you being afraid of him or her.
Yeah. And you're not on top of them. It's really a whole different thing. There's so many things that go into riding a horse, whether that horse felt physically okay that day, whether they wanted to be ridden, all of those things.
Right.
There's a quick story on that. When I first started practicing with people and learning how to do this horse thing, in the coaching sense, there was a horse that I was using who I still adore. His name is Buzz, and he is this giant, beautiful Palomino who I affectionately referred to as Butt, because he was so rude and so obnoxious. And when I rode him, when my mom first bought him, and with a friend, they owned him together, I rode him and he flipped over backwards with me. And he was so distressed about they were putting training reins on him, and it was very scary. It could have killed me. It could have injured him. It was very scary. And then he didn't really enjoy being ridden, and he hated being groomed. So we called him the curmudgeon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but I don't have any horses to practice with. So I guess it's Butt, all right. So I chose Butt, and I put him, he wasn't aggressive. So I thought, no one's going to get hurt. He might just, be a jerk. So I put him into the round pen with this client, and he was 100% a different animal, because he was not being asked to show up as anything other than himself. When he could be in the arena in that round pen and respected for the sentient being that he was, like, you're not on my back, you're not trying to brush me, you're not trying to impose yourself on me. He was, to this day, the most intuitive, loving horse I have ever worked with a client. He could sense if they were in distress, and literally he would step between them and me to give them private time, and he would wrap himself around them in this beautiful horse hug while they sobbed.
Wow.
He was incredible. Not the same horse at all as when we were trying to ride him or brush him.
Right. Well, and that's where you can sort of see that, different type of connection that kind of breaks that barrier that people have if they have some fear from something in the past, or maybe even having observed something happen to someone else in their family, or a friend who was thrown from a horse, and they've always had this vision of, it's a scary thing. And the truth is that at these circle meditations, it's just not the situation. I mean, you get a very different connection that you're not going to have any other way. You're not going to have it from riding. It's a different connection then, right? It's
because the horse has a choice to come and interact with you. And so if they're coming to interact with you, it's because they're drawn to you, and that it's good. It's just good.
The other thing that's always really interesting is to see how people sort of shake out in terms of where they sit, because it's all, you can sit wherever. And it just seems like usually people sit in, like connecting, or I guess where they're at, mentally. And it's just funny to watch that, how it sort of comes out. I mean, have you noticed that as a general rule?
I noticed that sometimes there's no pattern that I've noticed as far as who sits together when they come in groups or who sits separately. The one weird thing I noticed is that in the arenas, even our previous arena, there are like vantage points that had the better view, like outside the lake or outside to the woods and things, and people always face away from those. So that was the only thing I've ever noticed, is why don't you want to look at the beautiful view? But okay, I'll sit there. That's fine.
Well, Kit, I've got another interview I have to jump on, but will you be willing to do a full, much broader interview with us on a regular podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that'd be great. It's fantastic. zenhorse.org. I mean, it's just truly amazing. So I appreciate you taking the time today, and I hope you have a great holiday. And I look forward to seeing you sometime in early 2013 in the first quarter, maybe. That works. We can.
Thank you. And we appreciate you so much, Tom.
Wow. If you have, and I'm sure that you have not, most people have not, I'd say 99% of the world's population has not experienced a circle meditation with the Mustangs that Kit was talking about. And as much as to my chagrin, people say it's profound, but then can't explain it, it really is profound, and most often does defy explanation in words necessarily. So it's something you really have to experience. And if you have somebody that is having a difficult time, or maybe is grieving a loss of someone, that's a great, great way to help them get into a different kind of connection that can help to move things forward in a different way, right? It can change the trajectory, change those ruts that people get into where they just feel like they keep spinning around and spinning around. So connecting with horses in that manner is it is profound. It is amazing. And the story that the horses have, I mean, it's incredibly sad what she talked about. So I appreciate her expounding on that a little bit. And so no way is there a better way to make connections than with animals, really. I think if you have a dog or a cat, but especially dogs, right? We know how strong those connections are. It could be strong with a cat also, but cats just tend to be extraordinarily independent, and that's fine. That's good. I know that in my own home, I could really use a strong cat to take out some mice. But certainly canines, dogs tend to be, I think, more connectable for most people because they have no judgment. They sort of provide that type of unconditional love that I think most people have probably not experienced. So dogs tend to be very beneficial for people. And I can tell you that horses take that to an exponential level. I mean, they really do. Horses it's a different thing with a horse. And I strongly encourage you to take a look at zenhorse.org and some of the, there's a newsletter that you can sign up for, and just go to their monthly, as Kit said, the once a month circle meditation. I mean, just sign up for it, try it. And it's incredible. So really appreciate Kit being so benevolent to give us her time for that interview. And then, we talked with Virginia Chang in the our second broadcast, and Virginia is an end-of-life doula from New York, and she had some amazing ideas about looking at mortality sort of in a different way, like integrating it with our day-to-day lifestyle and recognition that we're here today, we might not be here tomorrow, or whether we're here for another 70 years, whatever. It's really helpful to think about that mortality awareness in a way that allows us to become more meaningfully connected and present, right? Living in the present moment. So, and to sort of follow up on some of the things that Virginia talked about, sort of on a more global basis, because, those are some big concepts. One of the other things that's really, I think, people forget about, and it's something you really shouldn't forget about because it just makes that time a lot easier and less chaotic if you do this. But our next guest is Joan Bretthauer, and she is also an end-of-life doula from Missouri, from the St. Louis area. And she talks a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the end-of-life doula and in this concept of mortality awareness, things that all of us, whether you're 18, whether you're 28, 38, 58, 108, really should think about and have the wherewithal to do these things now, so that you don't have to face a great deal of overwhelm. You don't have to put loved ones and family into a huge sense of overwhelm if something happens to you. Goodness forbid, we wouldn't want that. But if it does, and things do happen all the time, as if you turn on the news, We see it every day, several times, many times a day, right? So it's really important to be prepared. And Joan, I'll tell you a funny story about Joan, which I think she'd be okay if I said this, but I had been working with her on some kind of project a year or two ago, and I received an email from her, and she said, "Listen, I'm going to be busy for the next, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months." And so I thought, my goodness, for whatever reason, that email immediately took me back. And this is how things can happen, right? In just a second, but it took me back like over 40 years to when I was 16 years old. And I had I lived in Florida, and I was trying to get this girl to go out on a date. And I remember her first name. I can't remember her last name. Her name was Kelly. And I remember, I think I had tickets to Journey. And I thought, well, I am so going to get this girl to go out on a date. So she worked at some kind of department store in the men's clothing area. So I remember I was putting on a sport coat, and I was so nervous that as I was putting my arm into the sleeve, I got a strain in my shoulder, and I could barely move my arm. I had lost my mind completely. I mean, really. And so anyway, I went up to the department store where she worked, and I just asked her if she would want to go to this concert. And she said, no. And I don't know if it was then or maybe a phone call a few days later. And she said she was going to be busy for 2 or 3 months, maybe, or maybe more than that. So I don't know. It was just hilarious so I sent Joan a note back saying, hey, it's funny, but I hadn't thought about this in like 40 plus years, that I had someone else say that to me. It was just a long time ago, but it was someone I was going to ask out on a date. So I did tell Joan this time. I said, listen, if I happen to get a couple tickets to Journey, if Journey's even still playing, I'll ask you, but I won't get upset if you say you're going to be busy for the next few months. So I don't know. Anyway, that's a silly thing, but she was, she thought that was really hilarious about the whole memory deal. And it is just funny how something can trigger your memory from something that's so long ago, right? I mean, it's the power of the mind. We talk about it all the time on Connections with Tavia and the McClish, but wow, it is very, very powerful. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Joan Bretthauer, and I really appreciate her time also, because she does, as I said, a lot of the nuts and bolts kind of work. She's more, she does work as an end-of-life doula, and we talk about her website, and she also talks about people that live in rural areas and some of the difficulties that they have. And so, both Virginia and Joan have graciously said, people they can accommodate people wherever they might be virtually. So that's a really good thing too. So let me pull Joan in here, and I think you will enjoy this last in our series today. Let me see. She is okay. See, I try not to mess this stuff up, and I think I've got this. So here we go. Nope. See,
Okay.
that is not Joan. That is not Joan. See, this is why Tavia calls me the McClish, because what she really means is that I'm a goon, and that's okay. I mean, we are what we are. And I mean, we all understand that. So this should be it.
So Joan, I appreciate you
All right.
talking to us today. As you know, we're going to have a live stream 4 hours on Christmas Day for folks that are listening that might be feeling alone, might be sick, or in a hospital or in a facility somewhere, and just feeling like they're not really connected. And so I had a conversation earlier today with a counterpart, Virginia Chang, who I know you work with, and she's an end-of-life doula, and of course you're an end-of-life doula as well. And she was talking about things sort of on a more global level. And I think you and I were talking recently about maybe talking more about the nuts and bolts of things look, none of us can escape that. The day you're born, we know we have an expiration date. It just is, right? And it's not bad. It's actually not bad. And so part of that mortality awareness that Virginia was talking about, I think in talking with you about these nuts and bolts, it's important for people to know that, like, when we talk about advanced directives and things, that is important for people to do sooner than later. And maybe you can just talk about that, about why.
Sure. So advanced directives, we have advanced care planning, which means planning for your health care. And then that means having conversations about what kind of care you would want or not want at end of life, or when you can't speak for yourself. Really, it's a document that you complete called the Healthcare Advance Directive. So you do not have to go to a lawyer for it to be legal.
Right.
That's the first thing. That is a myth that people think they can only get one done by going to a lawyer. No, there are many ways you can get one done. But so having a healthcare directive completed is very important. When I work with clients at end of life, I help them complete their advanced directive if they do not have one completed. And that can go into some really great conversations. Now, anyone 18 years and older should have a healthcare directive completed. So we're talking two different things here. You definitely want one when you have a terminal diagnosis, because you definitely want it when you have a terminal diagnosis, but you really need one before that in case you're in an accident and you cannot speak for yourself. So advanced care planning is my specialty. I love it, and I want everyone to have one.
Well, let's talk about that, because I mean, I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about that it would be good for someone 18 or over to have. Can you talk more about that? Like, why? Like, because everybody who's 18, 19 thinking, I don't need that because I'm invincible.
That is correct. And that's why they don't have one. So when you are 18, you're of legal age. You make your own decisions. So hopefully you have a family member, a girlfriend, or someone who really knows if you were in an accident and you could not speak for yourself and it was life-threatening, then you definitely want someone there that can make decisions for you. When you have to make healthcare decisions under stress or duress, it's very challenging, and the consequences could leave family members and friends just really distraught afterwards. So it's just like life. People that are proactive in life will be proactive with completing an advanced directive. People that aren't proactive in life, just, what happens, happens.
They let things happen to them. Yeah.
Yes. But by completing your advanced directive, you really are giving your family or your loved ones a gift. It is a gift to give your family. And the only time that an advanced directive is used is when you cannot speak for yourself in a medical situation.
Well, and I think, especially people maybe in their 30s and 40s, that's something they worry about, because they think, well, what if, I don't want something done and I don't want someone else to speak for me. And I think what you're saying is, if they're capable of making the decision, no one else will.
That's right. That's right. They make their own decision. Even for people with dementia, if they are in that moment of awareness, then they can make their decision for themselves in that moment. But yes, it's very important to complete one.
So when you're talking about the directives, I mean, you're talking about the power of attorney for healthcare and finances, right? Two separate POAs.
Correct. But what I'm speaking of right now is healthcare only, not finance.
Okay.
And the thing about a healthcare directive, they call them advance directives. It's a healthcare directive. There are many different types. You can do I'm in Missouri, so there's a Missouri bar directive. There is the 5 wishes, which 5 wishes, it's legal in every state. In a few states, you have to have more documentation than just the 5 wishes. But there are a ton of different directives. So just know that the language, some directives call it your healthcare agent, some call it your power of attorney for healthcare. Some call it a surrogate. So there are many words for the same thing, which is the person in charge of speaking for you when you can't speak for yourself.
Now, would this cover, because a lot of the times the question it's in a medical facility comes down to a DNR, do not resuscitate, and that would be part of what you're talking about with power of attorney here, correct? Or is that something different?
So when that would come into play, in the hospital, you have a do not resuscitate. Out of the hospital in Missouri, you have what they call an out of hospital do not resuscitate. We call it the purple form. To have one of those, you have to have a terminal illness, and it has to be signed by a physician. We had one for my mother when she lived with me. She was on hospice the last 9 months of her life. She had an out of hospital do not resuscitate, which was a purple form hanging on the refrigerator. You can only get those if you have a terminal diagnosis.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that you should not complete your healthcare directive. So in addition to doing a healthcare directive for someone that's terminal, you decide if you want a do not resuscitate or out of hospital do not resuscitate. And then there's a TPOP form and a couple other forms that you can only get completed by a physician if you have a terminal illness, which those documents are different than a healthcare directive.
Okay.
But in your healthcare directive, you can say, I do not want CPR. You can say that in your healthcare directive, but if you're terminally ill, you need another document.
Sure, that makes sense.
Okay.
Now, this is confusing for people too. So what would you recommend if someone's listening that wants to really have a chance to look at this in a peaceful environment before something happens? Is there a website that you would recommend they look at or put in a certain search term to come up with the information they need?
You could search advance, ADVANCE, not the word advanced, ADVANCED. There's no ED on the end.
Okay.
You can search advanced directive and put your state in, and it will bring the document up. As part of my doula business, I do offer services for advanced care planning, which is completing your advanced directive.
Sure.
But there's also, in addition, there's an organization in St. Louis called Gateway End of Life Coalition. You can go to their website. They should have information on advanced care planning. They do offer seminars on advanced care planning and completing your advanced directive for free. So there are places that you can go.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, as you said, you don't need an attorney. So this isn't something that's, cost prohibitive for people, even if they,
Right.
It's something anyone can access and should, as you said.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
when you go into homes as an end of life doula, do you see a difference in the family dynamic in the sense of calmness, being at peace, compared with people that have done this work ahead of time and the ones that haven't with the advanced health?
Well, when you're actually an end-of-life doula and you're working with a client, and you can work with a client from a terminal diagnosis all the way through and still work with the family after the death, you are having those types of conversations with your client. You can create a vigil plan. The conversations you have are dealing with their end of life. So whether they have actually completed an advanced directive, everybody gets on board with what that client wants,
Okay.
the family members. Now, sometimes there are those conversations that have to be had because maybe the son or daughter or the spouse does not agree with what the dying person wants. So sometimes it can be challenging. So far, I have not experienced that. It's been very, family members have been on board with what the loved one wants. And for me, it's about my client. What do they want? That's who I'm advocating for, what they want. So there could be longer conversations about specific things if family members don't agree. But so far, I've had good luck with it.
So this is interesting because when you meet with a client, do you sort of, is it like, the clergy parishioner sort of confidentiality thing where you have the client and you speak with him or her individually for a certain period and then the family comes in? Is that kind of how that works, or?
It can work both ways.
Okay.
Sometimes the family's in there and you have the conversations, and sometimes clients do not want to talk about specific things in front of their family. So
Right.
they'll wait until the family member leaves.
Right.
And then they'll have those types of conversations with you.
Yeah, I would think that you would sort of provide kind of a safe harbor.
Oh,
Right.
yes.
That people would feel more comfortable telling you things that they might, as you said, not want to tell the family for whatever reason.
Right. You have to, as an end-of-life doula, you have to build trust almost immediately, because my goal is that people have a good death. A good death looks different for everyone. So I have to gain their trust so they know that I am there to work with them. I am also there to work with the caregiver. It's not just about the client, but it's about the caregiver too. So.
Well, it was interesting when I talked with Virginia Chang earlier today. She had written in one of her blog posts, I can hold space for the words, stories, and emotions of the dying because I am an empty vessel. And what struck me about that was I have a feeling, and I have a feeling because I've seen this in many family dynamics, the person that is sick or, transitioning to passing on hasn't really felt that they've been heard, even with family around.
Yes.
And
yes.
I mean, the whole underpinning of this podcast is about connections. And I just think it's really interesting and really important for people to understand that connection is, for someone like in your situation, to actually listen, not impose positions on people or anything else, but to be that person that listens for whatever it is that's being said.
Absolutely. You hold, the end-of-life doula holds the space in the environment you're in. We are not there to judge. We are not there to give our opinion. It is not about us. It's about the client and the caregiver and their circle, their loved ones, whoever is there.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure you've seen that, where even people with what appears to be on the outside a pretty significant sized family and all kinds of people around, but yet they still don't feel like they've been heard. And I mean, I've experienced that myself, and I know other people have. So
sure, you do. The doula really does have to listen, and sometimes the doula can offer suggestions to the client or the caregiver to help them understand, or to hopefully provide some clarity. Clarity and education is important.
Well, I would also think that when people are in that position, there's a sense of overwhelm that kind of takes them over.
Yes.
And how do you work with that? I mean, because it seems like that would be a big obstacle.
Well, it can be a big obstacle, and it can be challenging, but the goal of the end-of-life doula is to try to help alleviate that overwhelm for the caregiver, overwhelm for the client too. When people are in overwhelm, they can't function. And so you want to make sure that they have what they need, and you try to soften the overwhelm for them. And that actually usually comes through educating them and reminding them. Just because you tell the caregiver something once does not mean they are going to remember it when they need to remember it. So you are there for reinforcement.
Right.
And the goal is to dissipate the overwhelm. That is the goal. That's
right,
one of
because
the goals.
People can't make rational decisions when they're in fight or flight or freeze. I mean, it just doesn't work.
Right. right.
it's an autonomic nervous system reaction. And it really, you know, when cortisol and adrenaline are kicking in, you're not going to make a decision that is meaningful long, you know, from the long vantage point. For the immediate time, it's okay if there's a tiger coming at you, but most of the folks you're dealing with aren't going to have tigers in their rooms, I wouldn't think. So
Right.
let's hope not.
Right. And this is the end of life. So you only have one chance at getting it right. One chance.
Right. Which is a big, I mean, that's a lot of weight on your shoulders walking into anyone's home under those circumstances, right? I mean, that's gotta be.
It can be. It can be. Mm-hmm.
Do you typically, is hospice already in with people when you're working with them, or can you facilitate hospice coming in as well if they are?
Absolutely. I can facilitate hospice. Yes. And I am a proponent of hospice. And actually in my healthcare directive, the number one thing is as soon as I qualify for hospice, put me on. Yes.
Okay.
I want that oversight. So I am yes. In our area in St. Louis, we're very lucky. We have several hospices. And so we have several to choose from. Not all areas have that choice. I don't know how many we have. Maybe we have 15 or 20, but that's a lot.
That is a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we are lucky in St. Louis. Now, for the rural areas in Missouri, it's a little different. They don't have that many choices, but we are lucky. We do have choices, and I highly recommend having hospice at end of life. Not all people end up with hospice, though, at end of life, but I highly recommend it. Yes. And for people that are just terminally diagnosed or people that are chronically ill, I highly recommend seeking palliative care. So palliative care and hospice are not the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. If you could explain that.
Well, hospice is comfort care where you have 6 months or less before you actually die. And so some hospice patients are on hospice longer than 6 months, but that's another story. But palliative care is, if you are seeking palliative care, you can still seek treatment and get care, where when you go on hospice, you do not seek treatment anymore. You are looking for the
comfort only
care. Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Which for those of us that have had that experience typically involves like medication, like morphine for addressing pain issues and things, right?
Yes. But pain, especially when it comes to the end of life doula, pain is the number one thing. Whenever I see my clients or talk to them, my first question is, are you having pain? And if they say yes, is it physical pain or is it spiritual pain?
Right.
So, you know, spiritual pain, no matter how much medication you take, is not going to help.
No, it's not. You can't mitigate it with medication. Well, I guess some people try to with different medications, but yeah.
Try. Yes. Try to, but yes.
It doesn't work.
So, no.
Right. So, I know when I spoke with Virginia earlier today, she said that she actually does some work with people through virtual, like what we're doing. Is that something that you've adapted to as well? With
yes,
COVID?
I have. Yes. And the good thing about it is that for people in rural areas, it is so important for them to have the connection.
Yeah.
Of someone, especially at this time. So for rural areas, hospice, end of life doulas are really important. Hospice is too, but rural areas, healthcare for rural areas is not good at all.
It's difficult. And the great thing about you is that you can help facilitate the hospice connection as well for people in a rural area if they connect with you virtually. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's excellent.
Yes.
Yeah, how do people contact? Do you have a separate website, or what like if they wanted to reach out?
The funny thing is when people call me, I'll say, well, how did you find me? And they'll say the internet. And I'll say, oh, my website. And they will say, yes, there were other names on your website too. Well, when they say that, it's like, okay, that was not through my website. I'm glad you found. I don't say this to them. I'm thinking, I'm glad you found me, but my website is so basic. I mean, you can go to it and, but anyway, it's not like I have a bunch of Google Analytical and all that. But through Gateway End of Life Coalition in St. Louis, there's an organization in St. Louis called Midwest End of Life Doula Collective. I started this collective about 4 years ago. And so Gateway End of Life Coalition on their website has a tab for the Midwest End of Life Doula Collective. And that lists the doulas in St. Louis. Now, I do know that that site needs to be updated, but also there is a national organization called National End of Life Doula Alliance.
Okay.
They're a national organization, and doulas, you have to pay to be a member. Well, they have a website that lists all the doulas in the country. Anywhere that there's a doula that's a member, they list their name. So those are two ways that people have actually found me.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
And end of life doula, the concept, people locally in St. Louis don't really know about it. So sometimes they really don't know what kind of questions to ask when they call. And so when I try to describe my services, sometimes they hire me and sometimes they don't for whatever reason. But I try to make it as clear as possible, but it's hard to describe sometimes.
Well, and
So-
we only had a few minutes to do this because of the time with the holidays and everything, but we definitely would like to have you come back to do, because as you said, we could talk about this for much longer and more in depth. And we haven't had time to really touch on a lot of things I know you wanted to, but I think it's important for people to hear all this and realize, yeah, there's a world of information out there that I'm not aware of that we really should look at and
Yes.
figure out sooner than later, because nobody needs to be operating in that overwhelmed place.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So will you come on with us for an hour sometime in the next? I know usually you're out at least 4 or 5 months. So let's say in the next 6 months, can we book you for another follow up?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Okay.
I promise I won't tell you to be 4 months.
It's okay.
I really was being serious about that because I had so much going on at the time. So I wasn't avoiding you,
Oh,
but
no. Here, let me stop the recording real quick. Joan, it's been great. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to hit the stop recording real quick, and let's see.
Wow. Well, that was great. Joan is fantastic, and we appreciate her. I think she was a great follow-up in terms of some of the nuts and bolts from the discussion with Virginia Chang earlier today, talking about the mortality awareness concept, and that really is extremely meaningful. So I want to just, again, thank Lori Bickle for coming on this morning. And, of course, Lori, you can catch up with her at loriannbickle.com. And Virginia Chang, just an amazing conversation. End of Life Doula, her website, tillthelastdoula.com. Excellent information there. Amazing. She has a blog post there and just a lot of interesting publications to read. And then Father Bob Flannery, another amazing guest, had some really good ideas about helping to facilitate connection with people that might not otherwise have the wherewithal to take the step or that little bit of action to get themselves connected the way they need to. And of course, Kit Maxwell. We could talk forever about circle meditations, about wild Mustangs out west, and about the plight of those Mustangs. And you can get more information about her at her website, which is zenhorse.org. And of course, we just talked with Joan Bretthauer, and she was a wealth of information. And the website, she referenced it a few times. It's Gateway EOL for endoflife.com. And that's Gateway, Gateway, GatewayEOL.com. A lot of great information there. And of course, you can find Joan's contact information on that website. And we just thank everybody that was involved today. Want another shout out to Tavia, that we hope she has an amazing holiday, Christmas. And I want to leave you real quick with a quote that was from Michael Jordan. And I don't know why this has always just resonated with me and with so many people, no matter what kind of plight they might be going through. And I know this year's been difficult for a lot of people for lots of different reasons. And so as we're sort of getting to the end of the year, I love this quote because it's so powerful from someone as significant as Michael Jordan. And for those of you who might not know, he was an amazing basketball player for the Chicago Bulls. I'm not a big sports guy, but I mean, it's hard not to know who Michael Jordan is. So knowing what kind of an amazing athlete he was, to hear this quote, and I'm pulling this right off of Forbes, but you can find this anywhere. But here's the quote: "I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I have failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." And I don't know, that just strikes me as just an amazing quote, an amazing way to think about life. And I think it's true. We can't appreciate success without having had failures along the way. And no matter how small or how big, I think it's important to think about Michael Jordan's thoughts on that. So again, Merry Christmas to everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And these videos will be available on YouTube and Facebook. And thanks again for taking the time. And if you do know somebody who maybe is alone, just that you haven't been in contact with for a while, reach out, make a phone call. It's 2 minutes, nothing big, right? You've heard all these people talk about it. It doesn't have to be anything significant, nothing, huge. Just say, hey, what's going on? Can I come by maybe for 5 minutes, or stop by some donuts, or, or if they like vegetables or fruits, whatever. But just check in. I mean, it's easy. And some of the ideas that our folks had today were compelling. And I hope that you can incorporate some of those into your day-to-day work and time spent with friends and family and people close to you that maybe could use a little bit extra help, especially around the holidays. So have a great week, and we will see you back from, I'll have to double check the time, but Tavia and I will be here next week on the 1st of January. I look forward to bringing in 2023 with all of you. And so again, Merry Christmas.